When analyzing the market, it's a good idea to start before you implement the tax. This way we can compare to what the market was to what it will be after the tax. So in this market, we have an equilibrium price of 100, and we need to figure out the consumer surplus. Consumer surplus is anything above the market price and below demand. This gives us a shape of a triangle. So we just need to figure out what the height of the triangle is and what the base of the triangle is. To figure out the height, we need to figure out the vertical distance. We're going to start at $100 and measure up to the top of the graph, which is 125. That means that the vertical distance of this triangle is $25. For the base, we need to look closely at this graph. It is a truncated graph that starts at 50 and has a market equilibrium quantity of 100. That means that we're only analyzing these 50 units. Since this is a triangle, we need to divide by 2. This will give us $625 of consumer surplus. We can do a similar analysis for producer surplus, but now we're measuring downwards. We're looking at the triangle below the red one, shown here in blue. Again, we need to measure the height of this triangle, and we do this from point 1 to point 2 that are shown right now. The vertical distance between $50 and $100 is $50. We're going to multiply it times the same base that we had for the triangle above, and we're going to divide by 2. This will give us $1,250 of producer surplus. This is what the market looks like before the tax. If we add consumer surplus and producer surplus together, we will get what we call total surplus for the market. We just have to add 625 plus 1,250. Now we need to introduce the tax into the market. The tax in this example is $30, as shown here in the example, and it's going to be imposed on the buyers. However, this doesn't really matter because we are going to use the wedge method. So now we only have to find a wedge that has a vertical height of $30. So in this type of example, it's a good idea to start measuring examples such as this. Here we have point 1 and point 2. Let's measure the vertical distance between these points. We're going from a price of 90 to a price of 110. If you subtract these two numbers, you will see that it's not 30. So we need to look again. Let's find another spot. Now we have another point. Let's label that point 1 and point 2. These 2 points start at $80 and end up at $110. If you do a quick subtraction, you will find that 110 minus 80 is going to equal the $30 for the tax that we need. So we have found our wedge. The wedge is the opening that you see from point 1 to point 2. So this gives us 2 different prices that we must understand and analyze. So after the tax, we have a price of 80 represented by point 1. This point 1 is going to signal what the producer or the seller price is. Again, this number is $80. For point number 2, it intersects at $110 as shown on the graph. This is what we call the consumer or the buyer price. And again, this is $110. Notice that if you subtract 110 from 80, you will get the tax, which is $30. Now, what do these numbers represent? Let's start with the producer or seller price. In this example, the seller price is $80. What does this mean? It means that after the sale is done, the seller will only keep $80. And the buyer, in order to purchase the item, must pay $110. The rest, which is $30, is the tax. These $30 are your tax revenue. This is the money that's gonna go to the government. Tax revenue can be represented by a rectangle on this graph. If you take the area between 110 and 80, and that borders the vertical distance from point 1 to point 2, you will get your rectangle that signifies tax revenue. Let's label this in green. As you see, this is the shape of a rectangle. We can use the formula to get the area of the tax revenue. The formula for a rectangle is simply base times height. So we already know the height, which is our tax, which is $30. Now we must find the base of this rectangle. We can take point 1 and 2 as a reference and go down to where we see the number 80. Now, notice that we are starting at 50 and our new quantity is 80 units. So the difference between those is 30 units. So now we have our formula for tax revenue, which is $30 times 30 transactions equals $900 in tax revenue. We will also need to figure out how many transactions were lost. This is something that we're going to call dead weight loss. The black triangle on top represents the transactions lost from consumers being pushed out of the market by a higher price of $110. Similarly, we can see that producers are also going to get pushed out of the market because producers now see that they only get to take home $80. So how many consumers and how many producers got pushed out? In other words, how many transactions got canceled due to this tax? The answer is 100, which was the original quantity, minus 80, which means that we lost 20 transactions. This area is a triangle, so we're going to use 30 times 20 divided by 2. This will give us $300. These $300 represent all the transactions lost due to the tax. Now, if we take the $900 from tax revenue and the $300 that we have for deadweight loss and add them together, this amount will signify all the total surplus that got taken away from both the consumers and the producers. So now let's analyze what the new consumer surplus will be. You will notice that the red triangle got smaller, as did the blue triangle. That means that consumers and producers both lost surplus. We have a similar approach to what we did before the tax. For consumer surplus, the height of that top triangle is $15 from 110 to 125. Now there are only 30 transactions and we divide those by 2 because we are still looking at a shape of a triangle. Remember that we lost transactions due to the tax, so the units are going to change from 50 to 30. Remember, we lost 20 transactions. The new consumer surplus is 225, a significant decrease from what we had before the tax. We can take a similar approach to producer surplus. The height of the blue triangle is $30. We go from 50 to 80. And we're going to multiply it again by 30 transactions divided by 2, and this equals $450. I now have analyzed the market after the tax.